had said he got the call from Tyreek Hill in the hospital bed before getting an MRI. Hill was also seen waving to fans and keeping his spirited personality on the cart.
It's a tough one. Coach Mike McDaniel says he also tore multiple ligaments, including his ACL.
Tyreek Hill's worst nightmare has officially come true, and it was already a very tumultuous season for the Cheetah leading up to his Monday Night Football matchup. But Monday Night Football was the very cherry on top of a disastrous season for Tyreek Hill. With exactly 13 minutes and 21 seconds left in Monday Night Football, we watched the fastest receiver in the NFL's history's career end in real time. But even before we saw this really gruesome injury, Tyreek Hill was dealing with 8 domestic violence allegations, a contract that's about to blow up in Miami's face, and performance numbers that had him trending towards the worst statistical season of his career. But before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications if you want to get the latest NFL news. And real quick, a brief word from our sponsor. I just swept Monday Night Football, making over $500 off of 3 plays. And a lot of my Instagram followers have been raking in a ton of money as well. I mean, just look at my DMs, guys. Now, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 in lineups when you make a play of $5 or more. And for Thursday Night Football, this is what I'm thinking of running with. I got Christian McCaffrey going over 39.5 rush yards. Devontae Adams has been finding the end zone each and every game this week, so I have him doing that once again against San Francisco. And I have Puka Nacua going for 70 receiving yards at least. If all 3 of these hit, my $50 would turn into $150. I give away a lot of picks on my Instagram story, and I also have a partnership with Fantasy Aces. The link to that's in the description down below. We've been hitting so much as a result of that Discord community. If you want to check them out, check out the WAP link in the description down below. And thank you, Prize Picks, for sponsoring today's video. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Today we're breaking down how a routine catch on Monday Night Football might have been the final play of Tyreek Hill's Hall of Fame career. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to understand why the Miami Dolphins might be preparing to cut their biggest star before he ever steps foot on the field again. So if you watched my last video breaking down the Tyreek Hill DV situation and his complete collapse this season, you already know that things were bad. But Monday night unfortunately changed everything. So let me catch you up real quick for those who missed it. Before this injury, Hill was already dealing with 8 DV allegations from his ex-wife and an ongoing divorce case. On top of that, he just had 15 catches for 198 yards through 3 games. Prior to Monday Night Football, this was his worst start to a season ever. It included a full year without a reception over 30 yards. The Cheetah had lost his speed, lost his captaincy, and was in the middle of an NFL investigation that could result in a suspension. But we all thought, you know what, maybe he can turn it around. Maybe the Dolphins get their first win, Tyreek Hill gets going, and we can all move forward. After all, I'm in 5 fantasy football leagues, and I was such a believer in Tyreek Hill this year that I drafted the man in 4 of them. And then Monday night happened and everything changed for Tyreek Hill. So it's Monday Night Football, Week 4, the New York Jets versus the Miami Dolphins at Hard Rock Stadium. Both teams are sitting at 0-3, desperate for their first win. Hill was actually having one of his better games of the season, 6 receptions on 6 targets for 67 yards. The Dolphins were leading 10-3 at the time. There was actual hope in Miami for the first time all season. Then with 13 minutes and 21 seconds left in the third quarter, it all came crashing down. Now, guys, Tyreek Hill's injury is very gruesome, so if you want to skip 30 seconds ahead to avoid seeing the injury, this is your trigger warning right here. But Tua hits Tyreek Hill on a routine out route to the sideline. Jets defensive back Malachi Moore comes in to make the tackle, and Hill's left leg just buckles. His foot is pointing towards his right leg, his knee bending in a way that knees are absolutely not supposed to bend. The broadcast immediately cut away. Players from both teams took a knee. You could see it on their faces. They knew this was bad. An air cast was applied right there on the field. They brought out the cart, and as they wheeled him off, Hill, in one of the most Tyreek Hill moments ever, was clapping and waving to the crowd, trying to stay positive even though everyone watching this knew his world had just changed forever. Hill was immediately taken to a local hospital for imaging, evaluation, and observation. The Dolphins ruled him out with a knee injury, and then we waited. The initial reports came in from Adam Schefter. Hill is believed to have dislocated his knee. Mike McDaniel confirmed it after the game. Hill stayed in the hospital overnight. On Tuesday morning, we got the news that made it so much worse. Ian Rappaport dropped the bomb, and our biggest fears were even worse than we could have imagined. Tyreek Hill didn't just dislocate his knee, Hill also tore multiple ligaments in his knee, including his ACL. Hill underwent surgery that Tuesday, and here's the part that should terrify Dolphins fans and Tyreek Hill. Ian Rappaport added that Tyreek Hill could require additional surgeries, and there is no guarantee that he'll be ready for 2026. So let me break down what this injury actually means, because dislocated knee sounds almost simple compared to what actually happened. A dislocated knee isn't dislocating your kneecap and you pop it back in. This is a complete disruption of the knee joint where the tibia and femur separate. The ligaments that hold your knee together, the ACL, MCL, LCL, and PCL, some combination of those just snap. ESPN's Stefania Bell pointed out the two biggest concerns with an injury like this: the popliteal artery and the peroneal nerve. The popliteal artery is behind your knee. If that gets damaged, you lose blood flow to your lower leg. That's why Tyreek Hill was rushed to the hospital immediately. They needed to make sure that he wasn't at risk of losing the leg entirely. The peroneal nerve controls sensation and muscle function in your lower leg and foot. If that's damaged, you lose motor control. You can't flex your foot. You can't feel anything. Do you guys remember Marcus Lattimore? This man was supposed to be a first-round pick coming out of South Carolina, and he had a similar injury in 2012. As a result, he was a fourth-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers, but he never played a single NFL snap. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen to Tyreek, but when you hear dislocated knee with multiple torn ligaments, you need to understand this is one of the most catastrophic injuries in all of sports. This is career-threatening, even for a 23-year-old. For a 31-year-old receiver whose entire game is built on speed, I hate to say it, the odds are not good. Let me hit you with some numbers that are going to make you understand just how bad this situation is. A study on NFL wide receivers who underwent ACL reconstruction found that 31%, nearly 1 in 3, never returned to play in a regular season game. Let that sink in for a second. Almost a third of receivers who tear their ACL never play another snap in the NFL. But wait, it gets way worse. For those who do return, it takes an average of 10.9 months. That's 301 days. So Hill had his surgery on September 30th, 2025. That means his earliest possible return date would be late August of 2026, right when training camp is wrapping up, right when teams are making their final roster decisions. But here's the stat that should worry you. Wide receivers who tear their ACLs end their careers an average of 1.9 seasons earlier than they would have otherwise. They play less than half the number of games. Their targets drop by more than 60%. Their receptions get cut in half. Their yards get cut in half. And remember, this is just for ACL tears. Tyreek Hill didn't just tear his ACL, he tore multiple ligaments and dislocated the entire knee joint. That's exponentially worse. Let me give you some historical context. Since 1995, only 3 wide receivers have torn their ACL at the age of 30 or older and then managed to have at least 750 yards in a future season. That's 3 in 30 years. Who were they? Jordy Nelson, who wasn't necessarily known for his speed, was injured at 30 and came back with 1,257 yards the next year. Julian Edelman, primarily a shifty possession wide receiver for Tom Brady, injured at 31, came back with 850 yards and then 1,117 the year after. And the last is the legendary Reggie Wayne, who tore his at 34 and barely scraped together 779 yards in the following season. That's it. That's the list. 3 guys in 3 decades. And here's the thing about those 3. None of them were 31 years old coming off of their worst season in a decade. None of them were dealing with DV investigations. And none of them had contracts structured the way that Tyreek's is. Which brings us to the financial nightmare that's about to explode in Miami. Let me explain why Tyreek Hill's contract situation might be the final nail in the coffin of his Dolphins career. In 2025, Hill carries a $27.7 million cap hit. That's the second highest in the entire NFL for a receiver this season. But in 2026 is when it gets absolutely insane. Hill is scheduled to carry a $51.9 million cap hit. That's 16.9% of Miami's entire salary cap tied up in one player. Now here's where it gets interesting. None of Hill's 2026 salary is guaranteed right now. None of it. But, and this is a big but, if Hill is still on the roster on the 3rd day of the new league year in March of 2026, $11 million of that becomes fully guaranteed, plus a $5 million roster bonus. So the Dolphins have a decision to make before March 2026. Do they A, keep Hill on the roster, guarantee that $11 million, and hope that he can return from his catastrophic injury at the age of 32, B, cut him before March, eat the dead cap money and move on, or C, try to trade him and have another team deal with this mess. If Miami trades Hill before the summer, they'd have $15.9 million in dead cap in 2025 and could spread the rest into 2026. But if they cut him outright, it's a $28.3 million cap hit. Basically his current cap number anyway. But here's the $1 million question, or should I say the $51.9 million question. Who's trading for Tyreek Hill right now? Think about it from another team's perspective. You're giving up draft picks for a 31-year-old receiver who just suffered one of the worst injuries a football player can have. He might not be ready to play until late 2026 or even 2027. He just recently broke his streak of not having a catch of over 30 yards in a whole year, and he's currently under investigation by the NFL for domestic violence. He was already declining before the injury, and he relies entirely on speed, which is the first thing to go after knee injuries. What team is going to take that risk? And it gets even more complicated because we don't know if the Dolphins have an insurance policy on Hill's contract. The 49ers reportedly saved nearly $7 million in 2026 cap space when Nick Bosa tore his ACL thanks to their insurance policy. If Miami has similar coverage, they might be able to recover some money. If not, they're eating the full amount. The most likely scenario is Miami's going to release Tyreek Hill before March of 2026, eat the dead cap hit, and move on. It's the clean break that they need. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let me remind you of the other elephant in the room that's been following Tyreek Hill all season long. While Tyreek Hill was lying in that hospital bed on Tuesday morning preparing for surgery, the NFL investigation into his DV allegations was still very much ongoing. Let me recap with what we're dealing with here. Hill's estranged wife, Keita Vaccaro, alleged 8 separate incidents of domestic violence and court filings related to their divorce case. The allegations include being shoved to the floor, thrown to the floor, having her hair ripped out, being physically forced from their home and locked out, having a marijuana cigarette shoved in her face, and even being spit on.
That hawk and spit on that thing.
The first alleged incident occurred in January of 2024, just 2 months after they got married. The couple separated on April 7th, 2025, after police were called to their home for a domestic dispute. Hill has vehemently denied all of this through his attorney, calling it nothing more than an attempt by Miss Vaccaro and her mother and her counsel to shake Mr. Hill down. But here's what matters. The NFL's taking this seriously. Vaccaro's attorney met with NFL investigators. The league has confirmed it's conducting a full investigation under their standard policy. And remember, the NFL doesn't need criminal charges to suspend a player. Deshaun Watson got 11 games without any charges. How did he not get any charges? Oh my God. There's like over 30 women that testified against this guy. Now, if the league determines that Hill violated their personal conduct policy, he could be looking at a minimum 6-game suspension, potentially more given his history. Oh right, his history. Because this isn't Tyreek Hill's first rodeo with DV allegations. In 2015, while at Oklahoma State, Hill pled guilty to domestic assault and battery by strangulation of his pregnant girlfriend. He was kicked off the team and received 3 years of probation. Then in 2019, he was investigated for battery of his then 3-year-old son, though charges weren't filed. But the phone calls are out there and they don't really look good.
He is terrified of you.
You need to be terrified of me too.
So we've got a pattern here, and the NFL is watching. So combine the ongoing investigation with a career-threatening injury, and you've got a situation where even if Hill somehow beats the medical odds and is ready to play in 2026, he might be serving a suspension anyway. It's a nightmare scenario from every angle, and it gets way worse than this. Even if you put the injury and the off-the-field stuff aside, Tyreek Hill has been playing the worst football of his career before the injury. Through 3.5 games this season, Hill had 21 catches for 265 yards and a touchdown on 33 targets. That's averaging 12.6 yards per catch. For context, in 2023, just 2 years ago, Hill was averaging 112.4 yards per game. This year, he was on pace for about 1,200 yards for the season. That would have been his worst season since his rookie year. Still pretty good numbers though, you have to admit. But the most telling stat, do you remember when I mentioned this in my first video this year on the topic? The fact that Tyreek Hill hadn't had a reception over 30 yards for a year? I mean, the media was even trolling him about this before he finally was able to break it in week 3.
You haven't caught a pass over 30 yards in a full year.
You trying to piss me off today?
No, I'm not trying to piss you off. We see the speed is there.
Yeah.
But are the throws there?
I don't know, bro.
And here's what's crazy. Hill was actually seeing elite volume. He had accounted for over 53.5% of the Dolphins' air yards through the first 3 weeks. Tua was targeting him constantly. The opportunities were there. Hill just wasn't converting them into big plays anymore. The speed was gone. The explosion was gone. The ability to separate deep was gone. All of this before a knee injury that typically robs receivers of whatever athleticism they had left. And this is where we need to have a real conversation about age in the NFL, especially for wide receivers whose entire game is built on speed. Tyreek Hill just turned 31 years old this March. In most careers, 31 is young. In the NFL, for a receiver who relies on 4.29 speed, 31 is ancient. Let's look at some comparisons. When was the last time we saw a speed receiver over 30 dominate after a major injury? You can't name one because it doesn't happen. Jordy Nelson is the closest example. He tore his ACL at 30 and came back with 1,257 yards at 31. But Nelson was a route technician who could still win with precision. Hill's game has always been about speed. When Deshaun Jackson turned 31, his production fell off of a cliff. When Mike Wallace turned 30, teams stopped wanting him. Ted Ginn Jr., same story. Every speed receiver in the NFL follows the same arc. Mid to late 20s is the peak, and by 30, they're fighting to stay relevant. And Hill was already showing signs of that decline even before the injury. The deep ball wasn't there anymore. The explosiveness that made him special was fading. His longest catch this season before the injury was 47 yards. Now add a catastrophic knee injury that requires months of rehab, potential multiple surgeries, and complete reconstruction of the joint. How much of his speed, if any, is coming back? It can take 12 months before an athlete can return to full activity. That's September 2026 at the earliest. Hill will be 32 years old, 2 years removed from his last truly dominant season, coming off of an injury that ends 1/3 of receivers' careers immediately. And even if he somehow miraculously is able to play again, the research shows that receivers post ACL constructions see their targets drop by over 60%, their receptions cut in half, and their receiving yards cut in half. So the best case scenario is you're going to get the version of Tyreek Hill that comes back as a shell of his former self. Similar to Julio Jones when he was with the Tennessee Titans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Philadelphia Eagles. Same with Odell Beckham Jr. when he was with the Miami Dolphins. If Hill is lucky, he might be able to average 600 to 700 yards as a wide receiver 2 or 3 for a new team, running primarily short routes, completely unable to threaten defenses vertically at 32 years old with a $50+ million cap hit under potential NFL suspension. Why would any team want that? So let's talk about something that I actually care about here. Does Tyreek Hill have a case for the Hall of Fame? He has 11,363 receiving yards since entering the NFL in 2016, the most in the league over that span. He has 819 receptions, which is the 4th most since 2017, behind only Devontae Adams, Travis Kelce, and Stephon Diggs. His 83 touchdown catches are 3rd most in the NFL since 2017. Those are Hall of Fame numbers. Add in his Super Bowl ring with Kansas City, his 8 Pro Bowl selections, and his 5 All-Pro nods, and on paper, Tyreek Hill has a legitimate case. But here's the problem. Hall of Fame voters don't just look at stats, they look at longevity, they look at peak performance, they look at how a career ended, and they definitely consider off-the-field issues. If Hill's career ends right now at age 31 because of his injury, he's going to be one of the most complicated Hall of Fame cases in NFL history. Because yeah, the production's there, but the career ended abruptly. The last few years were marked by decline in controversy, the domestic violence allegations. Both the 2015 guilty plea and these new allegations are going to be a part of every conversation about his legacy. Compare that to someone like Calvin Johnson, who retired at 30 after 9 seasons. Megatron walked away on his own terms, with his health intact, and he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Or look at Terrell Owens, who had off-the-field drama, but he played until he was 37 and finished with over 15,000 receiving yards. Hill's career trajectory now looks more like a meteor than a sustained flame. Brilliant, explosive, dominant for a stretch, and then suddenly extinguished. That's not what Hall of Fame committees love to see. My prediction, if Hill's career ends because of this injury, he eventually gets into the Hall of Fame, but it takes multiple ballots, maybe 5, 6, or 7 years of eligibility. The voters will debate it every single year. Some will say his peak was too short, others will point to the domestic violence history. Eventually, the sheer dominance of his prime years gets him in, but it won't be easy and it won't be unanimous. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about all this? Is this truly the end of Tyreek Hill? I like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.